Pops Mellard flies into the sun, holding his own brother in a hug, and billions of years of a cycle older than the universe itself finally end. That sentence sounds insane. It aired on Cartoon Network, on a show about a blue jay and a raccoon who worked at a park and spent most of their time playing video games on a couch. Regular show ran for 8 seasons, 244 episodes, 1 theatrical movie, and 1 quietly devastating series finale. It won an Emmy. It outlasted almost everything that aired alongside it. Somewhere along the way, it turned from a slacker comedy into one of the most emotionally complete coming-of-age stories in modern animation, and most people who grew up watching it never quite noticed the shift until the show was over. Tonight, the entire story. From J.G. Quintel's boring hometown in California to a lollipop-headed man drifting into a star. Welcome to Regularverse. Let us begin. Before the park, how a bored kid from Hanford built a universe. Hanford, California is a small town in the middle of the state. Flat land, farm country. Not a lot of stoplights, not a lot of places to go, and not a lot happening on any given afternoon. The kind of town where a kid with any kind of imagination has to build their own fun out of whatever's lying around the house. That's the town where a boy named James Garland Quintel grew up. Everyone called him JG. He was born on September 14th, 1982, to Terry and James Quintel, and from a very early age, he knew exactly one thing about himself. He wanted to make cartoons. His mother remembers him saying it at 6 or 7 years old. Other kids would say doctor, or astronaut, or firefighter. JG would say cartoons. He wanted to make cartoons, and nothing ever changed his mind. He grew up watching the shows you would expect a kid like that to love. The Simpsons, for the jokes and the family chaos. Beavis and Butthead, for the lazy, weird, low-effort energy of 2 guys just sitting around making dumb comments about everything. Ren and Stimpy, for the wild, rubbery faces and the willingness to be gross and silly and strange. These 3 shows would later leave little fingerprints all over the work he would eventually make. You can see the family warmth of The Simpsons in the way regular show treats its park workers like a family. You can see the slacker energy of Beavis and Butthead in Mordecai and Rigby, just hanging out on the couch doing nothing. And you can see the elastic, cartoony weirdness of Ren and Stimpy in every supernatural monster that busts out of a video game or a coffee cup or a grilled cheese. He also played a video game called Toe Jam and Earl. If you've never played it, the game is about 2 aliens from outer space who land on Earth and basically goof around together. 2 friends, one tall and lanky, one short and round. They don't save the world. They don't fight a big villain. They just explore weird places together and react to everything they find. JG would later say that Toe Jam and Earl was a huge influence on him. 2 pals, different shapes, weird adventures. You can almost see Mordecai and Rigby inside that description already. Hanford was a quiet town, and JG and his friends had to find their own ways to pass the time. They pulled pranks, they made up games, they got into little adventures that seemed like a big deal at the time and became funny stories later. Years down the road, these small-town boredom adventures would become the backbone of regular show. Many episodes of the show came directly from real stuff that JG and his friends actually did as kids. Prank calls, eating challenges, sneaking into places they shouldn't have been, staying up too late, messing around with things they didn't understand. When JG was 16, his father gave him a video camera. For a kid who wanted to make cartoons, this was everything. He was a sophomore at Hanford High School at the time, and he started using the camera to make little short films. He used Lego figures. He used paper cutouts. He would move the figures a tiny bit, take a picture, move them a tiny bit, take another picture, and string the pictures together to make it look like the figures were moving on their own. This is called stop-motion animation. It is slow, boring, and difficult work. Most 16-year-olds wouldn't have the patience for it. JG loved it. At Hanford High, he also took an AP literature class and a pottery class, which seems random until you realize he was someone who just wanted to make things with his hands and his mind. He took a summer class where he learned how to animate properly and how to make flipbooks. His family was completely supportive the whole time. His mom never pushed him to have a backup plan. She just wanted him to be happy. And by the time he graduated high school, he was ready for the next step. That step was CalArts, the California Institute of the Arts. This is the single most important animation school in the country. If you have watched pretty much any modern Cartoon Network show, or any Disney movie, or any Pixar movie, somebody who made it probably went to CalArts. JG got in. He enrolled in 2002 and started working on a degree in character animation. At CalArts, he fell in with a group of friends who would go on to become some of the most important cartoon creators of his generation. One of them was a guy named Thurup Van Orman, who would later make a show called The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. Another was a guy named Pendleton Ward, who would later make a show called Adventure Time. JG was hanging out in the same dorms and the same classrooms as the people who were about to change what cartoons looked like on television in the 2000s. And all of them were just students at the time. Broke, tired, sleeping on couches, eating bad food, and making weird little movies together. One of the things that CalArts students did for fun was something called the 48-hour film project. The rules were simple and kind of beautiful. You take a bunch of words and put put them in a hat. At midnight, you pull a word out. Then you have the entire weekend to make a short cartoon inspired by that word. No planning in advance, no polishing later, just pull a word. Go home and make something. It was a great way to train your brain to turn ideas into finished films fast. JG did these weekends over and over again during his time at Cal Arts. Some of the films were forgettable, but two of them would end up mattering more than anyone expected. The first one was called The Naive Man from Lollyland. It came out in 2005, during the fall of his 4th year at Cal Arts. It was a short cartoon about a sweet, innocent, old-fashioned gentleman with a head shaped like a lollipop who walks around experiencing the world with childlike wonder. His voice was polite and proper and British. His reactions to everything were pure and kind. If that description sounds familiar, that's because the character in that short is the first version of Pops. The same Pops who would later show up on Regular Show. Same shape, same voice, same big happy eyes, same jolly good show. JG made Pops years before Regular Show even existed. The Naive Man from Lollyland went on to win 2 awards at the 2005 Nicktoons Film Festival. It won the Producer's Choice Award, which came with a new Apple computer and some animation software. It also won the Student Animator Award, which came with $1,000 in cash and more software. For a college kid, this was a huge deal. A well-known television producer named Fred Seibert noticed the short and called JG an original talent to watch out for in the future. The Hanford Sentinel, his hometown newspaper back in that flat farm town, wrote about him and called his win one of the memorable moments of the year. JG was becoming a name in the animation world before he had even graduated. The second important short was called 2 in the AM PM. It came out in 2006. It was a raunchier, weirder short about 2 guys who work the graveyard shift at a convenience store and accidentally eat some candy that makes them hallucinate. The short was dark and strange and grown up. It got into the Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted Animation Festival in 2007, which is exactly what it sounds like. A festival for cartoons that are too weird for normal audiences. One of the 2 main characters in that short was a blue bird voiced by JG himself. The other main character was a gumball machine with a grumpy personality. The bird was the first version of Mordecai. The gumball machine was the first version of Benson. Again, this is years before Regular Show existed. The characters were already there. JG was also working with a friend named Sam Marin on these shorts. Sam did some of the voices. Sam would later voice Benson, Pops, and Muscle Man on the actual show. 3 of the most important characters in the whole series. The core voice cast of Regular Show was basically already forming inside these student films, before any network had ever heard of any of it. In December 2005, JG graduated from Cal Arts with a degree in character animation, and now he needed a job. He got one pretty fast. He took a test to become a storyboard reviser at Cartoon Network. A storyboard reviser is basically someone who takes the rough drawings of a cartoon scene and cleans them up so the animators can use them. It's entry-level work, but it's a foot in the door. He started working on a show called Camp Laszlo, which was a kid's cartoon about animals at a summer camp. He stayed there from 2006 to 2008. During that time, he was also going to film festivals, serving as a judge at a Nicktoons event, and quietly building his reputation as a young animator who was going places. Then, in 2008, he got promoted. Cartoon Network put him on a show called The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, which was being made by his old Cal Arts friend, Tharop Van Orman. JG was made the creative director. That's a big title. It means he was helping shape the look, the feel, and the direction of the whole show. Flapjack was a strange, dreamy pirate cartoon with weird art and even weirder humor, and it's now considered one of the most important Cartoon Network shows of its era because it trained a whole bunch of young animators who would go on to make their own shows. JG was one of those animators. So was a guy named Pendleton Ward, who had been working at Cartoon Network on his own pilot for something called Adventure Time. While JG was working on Flapjack, he was also taking on small side jobs. He storyboarded a little bit on the animated film Horton Hears a Who. He got nominated for an Annie Award in 2009 for his directing work on a Flapjack episode called Candy Casanova. He didn't win, but getting nominated was a big deal. He was becoming a real player in the industry, and in the back of his head, the whole time, he was thinking about those old college films. The Lollipop-Headed Gentleman, The Blue Bird, The Grumpy Gumball Machine. He kept sketching too. At one point, he doodled a little raccoon hula hooping. He liked the drawing. The raccoon felt funny, lazy, a little irresponsible, the kind of friend who would drag somebody into stupid adventures. That raccoon would later be named Rigby. By 2009, he had enough characters in his head to start thinking seriously about making a show of his own. His first idea was called Normal Show. It was a cartoon about animals who worked at a zoo where the exhibits were humans. Mordecai and Benson from his college short would be in it. Pops from his other college short would be in it. Rigby the hula-hooping raccoon would be in it. JG brought the idea to Cartoon Network. They rejected it. But they didn't reject him. They just suggested a different setting. A park maybe, instead of a zoo. Same characters. Same weird energy. Same 2 slacker best friends at the center of everything. Just move it from a zoo to a park and and see what happens. That one suggestion would end up being everything. The whole show, the one that would run for 7 years, win an Emmy, produce a feature film, and touch an entire generation of kids and teenagers and young adults, started with a note from a Cartoon Network executive saying, "Let's put them at a park instead." JG took the note. He went home, he got to work, and he started putting together the pitch that would eventually become Regular Show. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. At the same time, something else was happening behind the scenes at Cartoon Network. Something that would give JG the exact kind of opportunity he needed at the exact right moment. A weird little experimental program was being put together. A program designed to let young artists make pilots without any interference from executives. No notes, no focus groups. Just make your short, make it your way, and see if it turns into a show. The program had a clunky, funny name, Cartoonstitute, and it was about to change everything for J.G. Quintel, for Mordecai and Rigby, and for the grumpy gumball machine that was about to become one of the most stressed-out cartoon bosses in television history. Section 2. Cartoonstitute and the pilot that almost didn't exist. Cartoonstitute was a little experiment with a funny name. The idea behind it came from two veteran cartoon creators named Craig McCracken and Rob Renzetti. Craig was the man who had made the Powerpuff Girls and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Rob was a longtime animation writer and producer who had worked on all kinds of shows. The two of them looked at how Cartoon Network usually made new cartoons and decided they wanted to try something different. The normal way of making a new cartoon was slow and frustrating for the people actually making it. A creator would come up with an idea, then the network would ask for changes. Then test audiences would watch a rough version and fill out surveys. Then the network would ask for more changes based on the surveys. By the time a show actually made it to the air, it often looked nothing like the original idea. A lot of the personality had been scrubbed out of it. A lot of the weirdness had been smoothed down. A lot of what made the creator excited in the first place was gone. Craig and Rob wanted to do the opposite of that. They pitched a program where young artists would be allowed to make pilot shorts with no notes from the network, no executive meetings, no test screenings, no changes requested by people in suits who had never made a cartoon in their lives. You make your short, you make it your way, and at the end of it, the network decides whether to turn it into a full series or not. The short itself would be the pitch. The short would be the test. If people liked the short, it would become a show. If they didn't, it would go on a shelf somewhere. The plan was to make 39 of these shorts total. The creators would be young animators, most of them fresh out of art school, many of them already working at Cartoon Network in lower-level jobs. This was a huge opportunity for somebody like J.G. Quintel, who had been working on other people's shows for a few years and was sitting on a pile of his own ideas with nowhere to put them. Cartoonstitute never quite worked out the way it was supposed to. Only 14 of the planned 39 shorts ever got made. The program got cut short for various reasons that had to do with network changes and money problems. Most of the shorts that did get made never turned into anything. They just sat there. A lot of very talented young artists made cool little films that basically vanished, but 2 shorts out of those 14 did get picked up as full shows. One of them became a weird series called Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, which was based on a Cartoonstitute short about a character named Uncle Grandpa. Uncle Grandpa would eventually get his own show too, years later. The other short that got picked up was JG's. This is where the story gets a little bit funny because JG almost didn't pitch the idea the normal way. Most people pitching a cartoon show walk into a room with an executive and talk. They describe the idea out loud. They say something like, "My show is about a blue jay and a raccoon who work at a park and fight monsters." And the executive listens and asks questions and either likes it or doesn't. JG knew that if he pitched Regular Show like that, he was going to lose. The idea sounded insane when you said it out loud. A blue jay and a raccoon who work at a park and have a gumball machine for a boss, a yeti for a coworker, and a man with a lollipop for a head as the park owner. If you try to describe that in a sentence, most people's first reaction is going to be confusion, followed by polite nodding, followed by a rejection letter. It's just too weird to land verbally. So JG did something smart. He decided to show instead of tell. He sat down and drew the entire pilot as a storyboard. A storyboard is basically a comic book version of a cartoon. You draw every scene, one box at a time, with little notes underneath explaining what happens and what the characters are saying. It takes a long time to make a good storyboard, but when it's done, you can basically flip through it and watch the whole cartoon inside your head. JG made his pitch into a full storyboard and walked into the Cartoonstitute meeting with it. He showed it to Craig McCracken and Rob Renzetti. They flipped through it, they got it, and they told him to go make the pilot. No notes, no changes, no arguments, just go make it. JG would later say that this was the most creative freedom he had ever experienced at any job. The pilot he made was exactly the pilot he wanted to make. Nobody tried to soften it. Nobody tried to make the characters cuter or the jokes safer. The show got to be as strange as it needed to be right from the very first frame. Now, before that pilot could get made, there was a whole lot of building to do. JG JG had his main characters. He had Mordecai the Blue Jay, based on his college short. He had Rigby the Raccoon, based on the drawing he had done of a raccoon hula hooping. He had Benson the Gumball Machine, based on his other college short. He had Pops the Lollipop-Headed Gentleman, also from college. But he needed a full world. He needed more co-workers. He needed a park. He needed a whole supporting cast. So he kept drawing. He came up with Skips, a big white yeti who would become the calm, wise, immortal handyman of the park. He came up with Muscle Man, a stocky green guy with a big ego and a million dumb mom jokes. He came up with High Five Ghost, a tiny ghost with a floating hand on top of his head whose whole thing is high-fiving people. Each of these characters was strange on paper, but together they started to feel like a real group, a little misfit family. Each one weird in a different way, each one balancing the others out. He also started thinking hard about the voices. JG wanted the show to sound different from most cartoons on TV at the time. A lot of cartoons, especially kids' cartoons, had very loud, very big, very over-the-top voice acting. Everybody was shouting all the time. Every line was delivered with cartoon energy turned up to the maximum. JG didn't want that. He wanted his characters to sound like actual young adults. Calm, natural, a little sleepy, a little bored. The way real friends sound when they're sitting around on a couch, not doing much. He wanted the show to be easy to listen to for adults, not tiring. To get that sound, he ended up voicing Mordecai himself. His own voice was naturally low and laid back, and he knew Mordecai from the inside, because Mordecai was basically a version of him. The character was based on who JG had been during his CalArts years. A 20-something guy hanging out with his friends, getting into stupid situations, but taking himself a little bit too seriously at the same time. JG later admitted that he had to learn how to yell for the character because he himself almost never raised his voice in real life. Rigby was voiced by William Salyers, a longtime voice actor who had worked on all kinds of animated projects. Salyers brought a raspy, scratchy, nasally quality to Rigby that made him sound exactly like the kind of kid who never grew up. Lazy, impulsive, always whining, always talking his way out of trouble. The voice became so iconic that it's basically impossible to imagine Rigby sounding like anyone else. The role of Skips went to a very famous actor, a guy named Mark Hamill. Yes, the same Mark Hamill who played Luke Skywalker in the original Star Wars trilogy. The same Mark Hamill who voiced the Joker on Batman, the animated series. One of the most respected voice actors in the industry. He had originally come in to read for the role of Pops. His take on Pops didn't quite fit. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't exactly what JG was hearing in his head for that character. At the same time, Sam Marin, JG's old CalArts friend, had come in to read for the role of Skips. His take on Skips didn't quite fit either. The fix was simple. They switched. Mark Hamill, who had come in for Pops, ended up voicing Skips. Sam Marin, who had come in for Skips, ended up voicing Pops. And once they switched, everything clicked. Hamill's deep, steady, grounded voice was perfect for the ancient Yeti who had seen everything. Marin's sweet, proper, big-hearted voice was perfect for the lollipop-headed gentleman who loved chasing butterflies. The whole show might have sounded completely different if that swap hadn't happened. Sam Marin would actually end up playing 3 of the main characters, which is a rare feat. He voiced Pops. He voiced Benson, the stressed-out gumball machine boss. And he voiced Muscle Man, the green-skinned prankster. 3 totally different voices, 3 totally different personalities, all coming out of the same guy. JG himself voiced both Mordecai and High Five Ghost. So between just JG and Sam Marin, 5 of the 7 main characters had their voices covered. Then came the question of music. JG wanted the show to have a very specific sound. He had grown up loving rock music from the 1980s. Big guitars, big drums, big feelings. Songs that sounded like Victory or Heartbreak or the last 5 minutes of a summer night. He wanted regular show to feel like it was living inside that kind of music. So when it came time to pick a composer for the show, he made a bold choice. He reached out to a man named Mark Mothersbaugh. If you don't know that name, here's who Mark Mothersbaugh is. He was one of the founding members of a band called Devo, which was one of the most influential weird rock bands of the 1970s and 1980s. You have definitely heard the song Whip It at some point in your life, even if you didn't know who made it. That was Devo. After Devo, Mark became one of the most well-known composers in Hollywood, writing music for movies and TV shows. He had scored everything from Pee-wee's Playhouse to a bunch of Wes Anderson films. He was a big deal. Getting him to score a cartoon pilot for a first-time show creator was a long shot. JG sent him the animatic for the pilot. An animatic is basically a rough, early version of a cartoon, stitched together from storyboard drawings, with temporary music and voice tracks laid in. It's ugly, it's unfinished, but it gives you a feel for what the final show will eventually look and sound like. Mothersbaugh watched the animatic. He said yes. He came on as the main composer for regular show, and stayed with the show for its entire run. There was one more music decision that would end up defining the whole tone of regular show. When JG and his writers were putting together those early animatics, they needed temporary music for the big emotional moments and the action scenes, stuff like a chase sequence, or a training montage, or a heartbroken ending. So they just grabbed real songs, famous rock and pop songs from the 1980s, songs they personally loved. They dropped these songs into the rough cuts just to feel out the timing and the energy of the scenes. When the Cartoon Network executives watched the animatics, they noticed how well the songs were working. Instead of telling JG to strip them out and replace them with cheap original music, which would have been the normal and much cheaper thing to do, the network made a surprising offer. They asked JG if he wanted to actually license those songs for the real episodes, pay the song owners, use the real tracks, keep the feel. JG said yes, as long as the songs were affordable and fit the scene. That one decision ended up giving Regular Show one of its most unique qualities. Real 1980s rock songs, playing over a cartoon about a blue jay and a raccoon, a song like Mississippi Queen by Mountain playing during a fight, a song like Don't You Forget About Me by Simple Minds playing during a big emotional moment. The music gave the show a grown-up weight that most cartoons couldn't match, because those songs came with their own history. When a kid watched an episode, they got the energy of the song. When a parent or an older sibling watched the same episode, they got the memories too. So by the end of 2009 and the very early days of 2010, JG had it all in place. He had his characters, he had his voice cast, he had Mark Mothersbaugh scoring the show. He had a deal with Cartoon Network for real 1980s music on the soundtrack. He had a pilot storyboard that Craig McCracken and Rob Renzetti had approved with no notes. He had the full green light to go into production. The pilot got made. Cartoon Network watched it. They liked what they saw. They made the decision to turn it into a full series. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The premiere date was set for September 6th, 2010. On that day, in living rooms across America, kids would flip on their televisions to see a brand new Cartoon Network show starring two 23-year-old best friends who worked at a park and didn't really want to. A blue jay, a raccoon, a gumball machine boss, a yeti, a lollipop, a green guy, a tiny ghost, and a very strange first episode involving a magical keyboard that gave its user the power to do absolutely anything they wanted as long as they yelled the right word at the right time. That episode would be called The Power. It would set up, in 11 minutes, almost everything the show would become over the next 7 years, and it would quietly introduce a group of characters that an entire generation of viewers was about to fall in love with for life. Section 3, Season 1, 2 guys, a park, and the first hints that this show was not normal. September 6th, 2010, a Monday night. The first episode of Regular Show aired on Cartoon Network at 8:15 in the evening on the East Coast. The episode was called The Power. Anybody watching it for the first time was about to see something they had never seen before on a kid's channel. The episode opens in a messy living room inside a big old house. Two guys are sitting on the couch playing a video game. One of them is a tall blue jay with a long beak and a relaxed slump to his shoulders. His name is Mordecai. The other is a small brown raccoon with a scratchy voice, a constantly grumpy expression, and a way of sitting that makes him look like he has no bones. His name is Rigby. They are playing a punching game. Rigby is losing. Rigby does not handle losing well. He never has, and he never will, across every episode of the show for the next 7 years. Mordecai and Rigby are 23 years old. They are best friends. They have been best friends since kindergarten, when Mordecai decided Rigby was funny. They now work together as groundskeepers at a park. Groundskeeper is basically a fancy word for park maintenance guy. Their job is to mow the grass, rake the leaves, pick up the trash, fix things that break, set up chairs for park events, and generally keep the whole place running smoothly. They are bad at their job. They are bad at their job on purpose. They spend most of their days finding ways to avoid doing anything that could reasonably be called work. This is a problem for their boss, Benson. Benson is a living gumball machine. His head is a glass sphere full of colorful gumballs. His body is a red metal base, and his personality is pure rage, held together by thin threads of professionalism. Benson spends most of the show trying to get Mordecai and Rigby to actually do their jobs. When they fail, his face turns bright red and he screams. His most famous line in the entire series is, "You're fired," which he yells at them roughly once an episode, though he never actually fires them. Benson was voiced by Sam Marin, JG's old CalArts friend, and Marin's nasal, stressed-out delivery made Benson one of the most quotable characters in cartoon history almost immediately. The park is owned by a very old man named Mr. Mellard. He lives in a mansion and barely ever shows up in person. The day-to-day running of the park is handled by his son, a gentle, lollipop-headed old-timey gentleman named Pops. Pops is sweet, kind, confused, and childlike. He speaks in a proper, polite, old-fashioned way, saying things like, "Jolly good show," and "Oh my." He loves butterflies. He loves ice cream. He loves his friends. He lives at the big house on the park grounds alongside everyone else who works there. Pops was voiced by Sam Marin, too, in a completely different voice from Benson. The same actor played the angriest character character on the show and the sweetest character on the show. Living with them at the house was Skips. Skips is a huge, calm, white yeti. He looks like a mountain who learned to wear a vest. He skips everywhere he goes, which is why his name is Skips. He is immortal. He has been alive for hundreds of years. He has seen everything and done everything, which means whenever something weird happens, and on this show something weird always happens, Skips is usually the guy who knows exactly how to handle it. His catchphrase is a quiet, deadpan, "You idiots," usually aimed at Mordecai and Rigby right before he saves them from whatever magical disaster they just caused. Mark Hamill voiced him. The same Luke Skywalker voice that had carried Star Wars and Batman the Animated Series now belonged to a skipping yeti in a park cartoon, and it worked perfectly. Two more co-workers rounded out the crew. Muscle Man, whose real name was Mitch Sorenstein, was a short, stocky, green-skinned guy with shaggy brown hair. He was a groundskeeper too, like Mordecai and Rigby, and he spent most of his time pulling pranks, taking his shirt off, lifting weights, and making dumb jokes that always started with the setup, "You know who else." His punchline, almost every single time, was "my mom." It was a stupid, lazy joke. It was also funny every time, for reasons nobody could ever quite explain. Muscle Man was voiced by Sam Marin too. That's three major characters from the same actor. The final main character was High Five Ghost, sometimes just called Fives. He was a small, quiet, floating ghost with a single hand sticking out of the top of his head, ready to high-five anyone who came near. He was Muscle Man's best friend, and the two of them were basically inseparable. Fives barely talked in the early seasons. He was the quietest character on the show, there to hang out in the background, give high fives, and occasionally drop a small line that made you remember he existed. J.G. Quintel himself voiced High Five Ghost, the same way he voiced Mordecai. That was the crew. Two slacker friends, one angry gumball boss, one sweet lollipop owner, one immortal yeti, one green prankster, and one high-fiving ghost, all living and working together at a park. On paper, it sounds like a setup for a quiet little workplace comedy. In practice, the show quickly made it clear that the park was not a normal park, and the job was not a normal job. The Power, that first episode, set the whole pattern. Mordecai and Rigby accidentally break a keyboard that belongs to Muscle Man. To avoid getting in trouble, they try to replace it. They end up with a magical keyboard that grants wishes when you yell into it. They use it to do stupid, pointless things. Eventually, the wishes spiral out of control. A demon shows up, and the episode ends with the two of them doing something called ham-boning to save the day. Ham-boning is a rhythm you make by slapping your hands on your chest, legs, and cheeks. Rigby believed throughout the entire series that ham-boning would one day save his life, and in that first episode, he was right. This was the formula. Start with something mundane, a broken keyboard, a boring chore, a game of rock, paper, scissors, a cup of coffee, anything small and regular. Then let it spiral into the supernatural. Let a small problem turn into a giant problem. Let a giant problem turn into a universe-ending problem. Let the boys solve it at the last second using something stupid, like yelling a catchphrase or punching a monster really hard, or yes, ham-boning. Reset. Do it again next week. It was a simple formula. What made it work was the voice. Cartoon Network had given JG specific direction at the start of production. They wanted him to age the show up a little. Their kids' programming at the time was rated TVY7, meaning it was aimed at 7-year-olds and up. They wanted regular show to be rated TVPG, meaning there was an understanding that older kids and teenagers and even adults might be watching. That one note gave JG permission to do something most cartoons couldn't. He could have his characters drink beer. He could have them curse, as long as it was mild. He could have them make jokes about hangovers and dating and getting dumped and being broke. So the show had a different energy from almost anything else on the channel. The boys talked like actual young adults. They said things like, dude, man, sick, and a lot of other stuff that sounded like how you might actually hear 23-year-olds talk at a party. They drank coffee in a coffee shop. They went to a bar. They got into real arguments about real things. On top of that, they fought demons and traveled through time and got cursed by wizards. That mixture of real young adult life plus total supernatural chaos became the signature flavor of the show. Season 1 was short, only 12 episodes. It ran from September 6, 2010 to November 22, 2010. Less than 3 months on the air. In those 12 episodes, the writers crammed in an enormous amount of world building and character establishment. The episode Just Set Up the Chairs introduced the idea that even the simplest task, like setting up chairs for a party, could turn into a life-or-death video game battle. The episode Prank Callers introduced the idea that Mordecai and Rigby's love of prank calls could actually open a portal through time and send them back to 1982. The episode Meet Your Maker introduced the idea that mutant hot dogs were a real threat in this universe. The episode Death Punchies introduced a series of martial arts moves so powerful they could kill a person, which Rigby of course learned and then immediately abused. The show was also introducing characters who would keep coming back for years. The coffee shop across from the park became a regular hangout hangout spot, and that coffee shop had a waitress named Margaret. Margaret was a red-feathered robin with a sweet voice and a polite smile. Mordecai had a giant crush on her from the very first time she appeared. In the episode, Caffeinated Concert Tickets, he could barely form a sentence around her. He got sweaty, he stammered, he said dumb things. Margaret found it confusing but charming, and the slow-motion buildup of Mordecai's feelings for Margaret would become one of the biggest ongoing stories in the whole show. Margaret was voiced by an actress named Janie Haddad. Margaret worked alongside another waitress named Eileen, a short mole with big round glasses and a huge, unshakable crush on Rigby. Rigby found Eileen annoying at first. He didn't understand why she liked him. She was clearly smarter than him, clearly kinder than him, clearly more put together than him. But Eileen was patient. Eileen was, in many ways, the most patient character in the whole show. Her storyline with Rigby would take years to fully develop, but the first seeds were planted early in the show's run. Eileen was voiced by Minty Lewis, who also worked as a writer and storyboard artist on the show. The first season ended on November 22, 2010, with an episode called Mordecai and the Rigbys. In this one, the boys form a two-man rock band and try to write a song good enough to win Margaret's heart. They cheat their way to a song by stealing lyrics from an old band. The old band comes back to take revenge. The boys have to fight them with the power of actual rock music. The episode captures something really important about the show. Mordecai and Rigby wanted something real, a song, a girl, a win. They tried to get it the lazy way. It backfired. They fought their way out of the backfire with something absurd. They ended up right back where they started, with nothing actually changed. This was going to be the pattern for a long time. Mordecai would never get the easy win with Margaret in season 1. Rigby would never get the easy win with his lazy schemes. The park would never turn into a place of real quiet. The whole show was about two guys trying to take shortcuts through their lives, and the universe itself refusing to let them. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And then, just 7 days after season 1 ended, Cartoon Network brought the show right back. The second season started on November 29, 2010, with an episode called Hello, Governor. The show had barely taken a break. The audience was hungry. Cartoon Network could tell they had something special on their hands, and they weren't about to slow it down. Season 2 was going to be much longer than season 1, and it was about to run all the way through summer of 2011, into season 3, and straight into one of the biggest moments in the show's entire life. A moment that would win regular show its first and only Emmy Award, beat Adventure Time and Phineas and Ferb in the process, and prove to the whole animation industry that a cartoon about two slackers at a park could stand shoulder to shoulder with the biggest shows on television. The episode at the center of all of it involved a hat, an omelet-eating contest, and a raccoon with a very serious allergy to eggs. Section 4, Season 2 and 3, Finding the Formula, Winning the Emmy. Season 2 started on November 29, 2010, with an episode called Hello, Governor. The title was a direct reference to the kind of thing a cartoon British person might say, and the episode itself was a horror story. Mordecai and Rigby rent a scary movie about a haunted British taxi that chases people down and mows them over while shouting, "Hello, Governor," in a creepy voice. After they watch the movie, Rigby becomes convinced that the taxi is real and coming for him. The episode is funny, but it also shows the show leaning hard into a genre it would return to over and over: horror comedy. Regular show discovered very early that its weird, slightly grown-up tone made it perfect for scaring kids in a fun way, and the writers never stopped using that. This season was 28 episodes long, more than double the length of season 1. That gave the writers way more room to breathe. They could try stuff. They could develop side characters. They could let the world get weirder, and they did. One of the biggest things that happened in season 2 was a Halloween special called Terror Tales of the Park. It aired on October 4th, 2011, during the gap between season 2 and season 3, but it's part of the season 2 era and the first of a tradition that would run all the way through the rest of the show. Every single Halloween, regular show would do a Terror Tales episode. The gang would sit around a campfire and tell scary stories to each other. Each story would be a little horror movie in miniature. Some were funny, some were genuinely scary, some were disturbing in ways that made you wonder how this thing was airing on a kids channel. The very first one had Rigby turning into a house. It had Mordecai getting stalked by a killer. It had Pops telling a story about an evil British doll named Percy that tried to murder him. Terror Tales of the Park would become one of the most beloved traditions in the whole series, and Halloween fans looked forward to it every single year. Season 2 also introduced a character who would become one of the most important side characters in the entire show. Her name was Eileen Roberts, and she first appeared in an episode called Brain Eraser. Eileen was a tiny mole with huge round glasses, a gentle voice, and a crush on Rigby that she barely bothered to hide. Rigby could not stand her. He thought she was annoying. He thought she was clingy. He thought she was weird. Everyone else on the show could see that Eileen was pretty much the perfect match for Rigby, except for Rigby himself. In the episode Do Me a Solid, solid. Mordecai makes Rigby promise to take Eileen on a date as a favor. Rigby agrees, grumbling the whole time. The date actually goes way better than he expected. For a brief moment, Rigby starts to like her. Then he panics and pretends he doesn't. That pattern, where Rigby almost lets himself like Eileen and then runs away from it, would repeat over and over again across multiple seasons. Margaret got more development in season 2, too. She stopped being just the girl Mordecai had a crush on and started becoming a real character with her own life. She was working toward her own goals, going to school, hanging out with her own friends, and slowly, gently, starting to notice that Mordecai was actually pretty sweet. In the episode Do or Diaper, Mordecai and Muscle Man make a bet. If Mordecai can kiss Margaret by Friday at midnight, Muscle Man has to wear a diaper for a week. Mordecai tries to make the kiss happen, and of course it goes horribly because he's trying to force it instead of just being himself. The kiss doesn't happen. The lesson was a quiet one. Mordecai couldn't win Margaret by scheming. If it was going to happen, it was going to happen honestly, or it wasn't going to happen at all. The Best Burger in the World aired as Season 2, Episode 15. On the surface, it was a simple story. Mordecai and Rigby get handed their dream burger from a roving food truck. They have one bite left. Instead of eating it, they waste their whole day running errands for Benson and end up losing the burger in a series of ridiculous accidents. The episode ended with them holding a tiny, sad scrap of burger bun and realizing they had blown their chance. It was a joke episode. It was also, if you looked a little closer, a very gentle lesson about appreciating things when you have them, because they won't be there forever. Regular Show loved doing that. A stupid plot about a burger that was also secretly about something real. Season 2 closed out on August 1st, 2011, with the episode Karaoke Video. And 7 weeks later, on September 19th, 2011, Season 3 began with an episode called Stick Hockey. Season 3 was even longer than Season 2, 39 episodes in total. It ran all the way from September 2011 to September 2012, a full year of Regular Show. By this point, the show had stopped being a new little experiment and had become a real hit. The ratings were strong. The reviews were strong. Kids loved it. Teenagers loved it. Parents who watched with their kids loved it. Cartoon Network had figured out that Regular Show was a pillar of their weekday lineup, and they kept giving J.G. Quintel more room and more episodes to build his world. In Season 3, that world got bigger. The side characters got more time. Muscle Man got storylines of his own. He had a girlfriend named Starla, a tall, tough, big-haired woman who was basically the female version of him. In the episode Fancy Restaurant, Mordecai and Rigby help Muscle Man try to impress Starla's parents at a fancy meal, and they end up getting attacked by waiters for not being fancy enough. Muscle Man stopped being just the dumb joke guy and started becoming a real person with real feelings, a real relationship, and real moments of sincerity. Benson got more layers too. In an episode called Think Positive, we learned that Benson was only angry all the time because he was keeping a much deeper anger bottled up inside him. When Pops begs Benson to stay positive for one whole day, the pressure builds inside him until he finally loses control in the biggest explosion the show had ever animated. The episode was funny, but it was also a little bit sad. It suggested that Benson's whole personality, the yelling, the red face, the stress, was a coping mechanism. He was doing the best he could with a job he hated and 2 employees who made it worse every single day. Skips got his moments in Season 3 too. He was quietly getting fleshed out as more than just the wise, silent one. His storylines hinted at a much longer history that the show would eventually explore in full. The writers were dropping breadcrumbs. Who was this Yeti? How old was he? How did he become immortal? Why did he skip instead of walking? All of these questions had answers, and the show would get to them eventually. But the single biggest thing that happened in Season 3, the moment everyone remembers, was an episode called Eggcellent. It aired on February 20th, 2012, as the 17th episode of the season. The plot was simple, in the way only Regular Show could do simple. The local diner, where the boys often ate, offered a challenge to its customers. Anyone who could eat a giant 12-egg omelet, called the Eggcellent Omelet, in one sitting, without throwing up, would win a special trucker hat that said Eggcellent on the front. Mordecai had been chasing this hat for a long time. He had tried and failed. Rigby mocked him for it. Rigby said he could finish the omelet easily. Rigby wanted the hat for himself, mostly to make fun of Mordecai with it. The problem was that Rigby was allergic to eggs. Deathly allergic. If he ate that many eggs, it could kill him. Rigby didn't care. He took on the challenge anyway, out of pure ego, and he did not make it. He collapsed. He ended up in a coma in the hospital, his body rejecting every egg in the omelet. The doctors told Mordecai that the only way to save Rigby was for Mordecai to complete the challenge in his place and win the hat, because Rigby's dying wish, apparently, was to see that hat. The episode followed Mordecai as he trained. He ate eggs in every form. He got tougher. Meanwhile, Rigby's ghost wandered through a strange afterlife where a giant, floating cosmic chicken demanded Rigby accept his fate and move on. Rigby refused. He wanted to go back. He wanted his friend. The ghost ghost story and the omelet story ran in parallel. Mordecai fought the omelet. Rigby fought the chicken. Mordecai finally finished the omelet. The hat appeared. The ghost chicken backed off. Rigby woke up in the hospital. Mordecai, covered in egg, stumbled in and placed the excellent hat on his best friend's head. It was a ridiculous story. It was also, underneath the silliness, a very real story about how far two best friends would go for each other. Mordecai nearly ate himself into a hospital bed to save Rigby. Rigby nearly died of a stupid challenge just to prove himself to Mordecai. Their bond, the whole engine of the show, was right there on full display. Excellent won regular show a Primetime Emmy Award. Specifically, it won the Emmy for Outstanding Short-Format Animated Program at the 2012 ceremony. The other shows it beat for that Emmy included Phineas and Ferb, which was one of the biggest hits on Disney Channel at the time, and Adventure Time, which was Cartoon Network's other giant weirdo hit, and J.G. Quintel's old CalArts friend Pendleton Ward's creation. Two huge shows. Regular show beat both of them. For a show that had premiered less than 2 years earlier, starring two cartoon slackers, this was a massive moment. The Emmy was recognition from the whole television industry. Regular show was no longer just a weird little Cartoon Network show. It was a prestige animated program. It was award-winning television. Sam Marin, the voice of Benson and Pops and Muscle Man, would later say at a fan convention that Excellent was his personal favorite episode. William Salyers, the voice of Rigby, picked a different one. He said his favorite was an episode called Over the Top, where Rigby annoys Skips so badly that Skips actually kills him. Over the Top was, at its core, a parody of the old Sylvester Stallone movie Over the Top, which was about arm wrestling. It was one of the clearest signs that Regular Show was a love letter to 1980s movies, 1980s music, and 1980s feelings, all filtered through the lives of two broke slackers who loved all of it just as much as JG did. Season 3 kept rolling. Skip Strikes gave Skips his bowling showdown with Death himself. Fuzzy Dice introduced a gang of mobster criminals called the Capicola Gang, who would keep coming back in later seasons. Terror Tales of the Park 2 continued the Halloween tradition, and the scary stories got even weirder and sadder. Fortune Cookie, Weekend at Benson's, and Camping Can Be Cool all expanded the world. Mordecai kept chasing Margaret. Rigby kept avoiding Eileen. Benson kept yelling. Pops kept saying, "Jolly good show." And then, in the very last episode of Season 3, which aired on September 3rd, 2012, and was called Bad Kiss, Mordecai finally kissed Margaret. At a wedding they had attended together. It was sloppy. It was awkward. Margaret was happy. Mordecai was over the moon. The kiss itself ended up being reset by a weird time travel twist, and the whole thing technically never happened in the real timeline. But something had shifted. The air between Mordecai and Margaret had changed. The slow burn of almost 3 full seasons of flirting and missed chances was finally about to turn into something real. Mordecai's love life was about to be a genuine storyline, not just a running joke. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. It was the perfect moment to head into Season 4. The show was coming off an Emmy win. The audience was bigger than ever. Cartoon Network was about to celebrate its 20th anniversary on the air, and they had a huge plan for how to market. They had asked J.G. Quintel to make the biggest episode Regular Show had ever attempted. A full, half-hour television special. An epic event. A massive battle that would pull together every villain the show had ever introduced, every ally the park crew had ever made, and a new threat pulled directly out of a Season 1 episode that nobody had thought about in years. The episode was called Exit 9B, and it was going to premiere on October 1st, 2012, as the opener of Season 4. It was going to mark the exact halfway point of the show's run, and after it aired, nobody who loved Regular Show would ever look at the show the same way again. Section 5, Season 4, Exit 9B, Thomas the Intern, and the First Real Romance. Exit 9B premiered on October 1st, 2012. It ran a full half hour, double the length of a normal Regular Show episode. Cartoon Network aired it as part of their 20th anniversary celebration, a big marketing event where the channel was showing off its most popular series all month long. Regular Show got the spotlight. The show had earned it. The episode begins with Mordecai and Rigby showing up for work one morning to find that something is very wrong. The park is gone. Not the park itself, but everything that made it the park. A giant highway off-ramp, labeled Exit 9B, has been built right through where the park used to stand. All their coworkers are standing around in strange, daze-like states, nodding along with a salesman who is telling them the park never existed. Skips doesn't remember them. Pops doesn't remember them. Benson doesn't remember them. Muscle Man doesn't remember them. Everyone has been brainwashed. The boys have a document from City Hall that can save the park. If they can get every single park employee to sign the document, the park park will be declared a historical site and the highway project will be cancelled. But everyone has forgotten who they are. Every signature has to be earned by jogging each co-worker's memory in a specific, personal way. Mordecai and Rigby have to fight their way through an entire brainwashed staff, one by one. They remind Skips of the only woman he ever loved. They show Pops a lollipop, which snaps him back to himself. They bring Muscle Man back with the help of his brother. They bring Benson back by setting up chairs, the most park job thing they could possibly do. Every reunion is a small victory. Every signature is a small piece of the park coming back to life. As the signatures pile up, the bigger picture starts coming into focus. A mysterious new figure has been running the whole operation. He reveals himself toward the end of the episode. His name is Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Garrett Bobby Ferguson Sr. was the villain of a Season 2 episode called High Score, where he was a floating giant head who held the world record on a video game called Broken Bones. Mordecai and Rigby beat his record. He didn't take the loss well. He exploded. His son had come back, grown up, full of rage, determined to destroy Mordecai and Rigby and everything they cared about as revenge for his father's death, to make his dad proud. This reveal cracked the whole show open. Regular show had been going for 3 full seasons, and Exit 9B was the first time the show openly admitted that all the weird little one-off villains from earlier episodes actually mattered. They remembered. They held grudges. They could come back. And then, right on cue, they did. The highway construction finished. A portal opened. Every villain Mordecai and Rigby had ever defeated came pouring out at once. The prank caller, the summer song guy, the haunted British taxi, the angry giant hot dogs, the death bear. Dozens of bad guys all at the same time, ready to finally end the park. Skips did the same thing on the hero side. He called in every ally the park crew had ever made. Death, the actual embodiment of dying, showed up on his motorcycle. Tecmo, a half-robot old friend, arrived. The god of basketball came down from the sky. The Guardians of Eternal Youth appeared in full armor. Gary, the magical wizard Mordecai, and Rigby had met in an earlier adventure, joined the fight. Every good guy the show had ever put on screen came back to defend the park. The battle that followed was the biggest action sequence regular show had ever animated. The art style shifted darker and more intense. The music got heavier. Mordecai gave a short, simple speech about standing up for the park and the people who work there. And then the whole screen exploded into chaos. The heroes won. Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr. was beaten. The park was saved. The historical site papers went through. Everything went back to normal. Exit 9B also quietly introduced a brand new character at the very end. A young-looking goat named Thomas. He was the new intern at the park. Thomas didn't do much in this episode. He barely spoke. But he would stick around through Season 4, Season 5, Season 6, and beyond, slowly becoming part of the background family. Way later, deep into Season 6, there would be a wild twist revealed about him. Thomas's real name was Nikolai, and he was a Russian spy who had been undercover the whole time. For now, though, he was just the new guy, nervous, polite, and trying not to mess anything up. The rest of Season 4 kept building on what Exit 9B had started. The show was bigger now, bolder. The writers knew the audience could handle more serious story arcs, and they started leaning into them. Mordecai's storyline with Margaret was the biggest of those arcs, and this was the season where it finally got real. In an episode called Meteor Moves, Mordecai and Margaret go up to a rooftop together to watch a meteor shower. Mordecai has been trying to tell Margaret how he feels for almost 4 full seasons now. He keeps chickening out. Every time he has the chance, he freezes. On the rooftop, he tries to kiss her. He hesitates, and at that exact moment, a magical being called the Guardian of the Friend Zone sends a beam of light down and pulls them both into a pocket dimension. The Guardian is a giant floating asteroid with a face. He used to be a normal person, a very long time ago. He lost his chance with the girl he loved because he never made his move. Now he's an ancient cosmic judge whose job is to trap hesitant people in the friend zone forever as punishment for their cowardice. He tells Mordecai that he's missed his chance. Mordecai begs for another try. He explains how long he's wanted to kiss Margaret. The Guardian, softened, gives him one more chance. Mordecai kisses Margaret for real this time. The Guardian announces that they are now officially out of the friend zone. Mordecai and Margaret hold hands. The episode ends with a real, earned romantic moment, years in the making. From that point on, Mordecai and Margaret are together. Sort of. They're dating. They hang out. They go on dinner dates. Margaret starts inviting him to family events. In an episode called Family Barbecue, Mordecai goes to meet Margaret's dad, a tough, intimidating man named Frank. Things go badly. They end up, through a chain of ridiculous events, jumping out of a helicopter together. Mordecai breaks almost every bone in his body. He survives. Frank respects him for it. He gets a handshake. He gets approval. The relationship is working. Season 4 also kept expanding other characters. Skips got an episode called Skips vs. Technology, where he struggled to use a computer. Rigby and Eileen had more small moments. Muscle Man's relationship with Starla kept growing. Pops got gentle little storylines about his sweet, strange view of the the world. The park felt like a real community. The final episode of Season 4 aired on August 12, 2013, and it was called Stake Me Amadeus. It was one of the most important episodes the show had ever made, and it hit like a train. Mordecai has been with Margaret for a while now. He has decided he's ready to ask her to officially be his girlfriend. Not just a girl he's dating, his actual girlfriend. He picks a fancy restaurant called Stake Me Amadeus for the occasion. He gets dressed up. He rehearses his speech. He plans every detail. He wants everything to be perfect. Things do not go perfectly. The Capicola gang, the mobster criminals from Season 3, show up at the restaurant as part of a revenge scheme, and a huge fight breaks out. Bullets fly. Tables flip. The restaurant owner, Amadeus Martinez, pulls out a bazooka and blows the Capicola gang to pieces. Chaos happens. The whole thing is a cartoon action sequence of the highest order. Through all of it, Mordecai is trying to find the right moment, and eventually he gets it. He sits down with Margaret. He asks her, sweetly, nervously, if she'll be his girlfriend. Margaret doesn't say yes. She tells him that what they have is special. She tells him that he's the first relationship she's ever had that felt like it could really go somewhere. And then she pulls out a letter. An acceptance letter from a college called Milton University. It's her dream school. She got in. She's leaving. She starts crying. She tells him she has to go. She runs out of the restaurant. Mordecai is left sitting there in his nice clothes, holding flowers, watching the girl he's loved for 4 seasons walk out of his life. The very last scene of the episode has no jokes. Mordecai sits on the roof of the big park house at sunset, holding a can of soda, staring at the horizon. Rigby sits down next to him. Rigby doesn't say anything. He just sits there. The two of them drink their sodas in silence. The sun goes down. The episode ends. That ending broke something in the audience. Regular show had had sad moments before. Every show has sad moments. But this was different. This was the first time the show had let grief just sit there, without a punchline, without a rescue, without a reset. Margaret was gone. She was really gone. No time travel was going to bring her back this time. No magical wizard. No funny creature. She had gotten into a college. She had made a choice for her own life, and she had left. That was the story. That was the ending. The episode also marked the end of a whole chapter for the show. The Capicola gang seemed to be wiped out for good, though the show hinted they might not be. Thomas's first arc was rounding out. Margaret was gone. The emotional world of regular show had just fundamentally shifted. Mordecai, who had spent 4 seasons chasing one girl, was now alone again. And not the comfortable alone of Season 1, when he didn't really know what he was missing. This was a deeper alone. A hurt alone. The kind of alone you only feel after you've come close to what you wanted and lost it at the very last second. Stake Me Amadeus is one of the most remembered episodes of regular show for a reason. It took a show that a lot of people still thought of as goofy, slacker, video game humor, and it reminded everybody that this same show was also about being young, wanting something real, and finding out that the world doesn't always cooperate with your plans. The very last second of the episode, as Mordecai and Rigby sit there on the roof, is the whole show in miniature. Rigby doesn't try to cheer Mordecai up. He doesn't make a joke. He doesn't fix anything. He just shows up, sits down, stays there. That's what best friends do. That's what the show had been quietly saying the whole time, underneath all the ham-boning and the prank calls and the magical keyboards. When everything else falls apart, the person next to you is what's left. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Season 4 ended there. Season 5 was going to pick up a few weeks later, with a Mordecai who was different now. Sadder, quieter, stuck. He was about to fall into a deep depression that would take him a long time to climb out of, and the show was about to introduce a brand new girl into his life. Not to replace Margaret. Margaret wasn't the kind of person you replaced, but to offer a different path, with a different person, who happened to show up at a New Year's Eve masquerade party wearing a mask, sharing a kiss Mordecai would not see coming. Section 6, Season 5, Dumptown, CJ, and Mordecai, trying to move on. Season 5 premiered on September 2nd, 2013, about 3 weeks after the heartbreak at Stake Me Amadeus. The premiere was a double feature, 2 episodes back-to-back. The first was called Laundry Woes, and it opened up the new chapter of regular show with a clear signal. Things were going to be different now. Mordecai was a mess. He had been drifting for weeks since Margaret left. He couldn't sleep right. He couldn't eat right. He walked around the park looking like someone who had forgotten how to be himself. His friends could see it. Rigby could see it. Benson, in his angry way, could see it. Everyone was worried, but nobody quite knew how to help, because Mordecai himself didn't know what he needed. Across Season 5, the show handled this carefully. It could have easily played Mordecai's depression as a quick joke, a sad montage, a pep talk from his friends, back to normal by the end of the episode. A lot of shows would have done that. Regular show chose to stretch it out. Mordecai's sadness showed up again and again across multiple episodes. Little moments. A long stare at a coffee shop. A half-hearted laugh. A guy going through the motions at a job he wasn't really paying attention to. The show let his heartbreak be real, because the show had earned the right to ask the audience to take it seriously. Eventually, though, life started moving again. It always does. The episode that marked the turning point was called New Year's Kiss. It aired in the middle of Season 5 on December 30th, 2013, timed almost perfectly to the actual New Year's Eve for the audience watching at home. Mordecai had been invited to a masquerade party at a fancy hotel called the Parkside Lux. A masquerade is a type of formal party where everyone wears masks so you can't tell who's who. Mordecai had also been invited by a girl named Tracy #, who he had met earlier that night. He thought things were going well. They were not going well. Tracy was using him to make her actual boyfriend jealous. When Mordecai figured that out, he wandered off alone through the party, masked and miserable, just wanting the night to end. The countdown to midnight started. People started pairing off for the traditional New Year's kiss. Mordecai, carried along by the crowd, ended up face to face with a girl he had never met before, also wearing a mask. As the clock struck 12, they kissed. It was a good kiss. Mordecai reached up to pull the mask off his mystery girl. Underneath the mask was a young woman with wild hair that looked a little bit like a cloud, round cheeks, and an expression of total shock. When she saw his face, she took off running. Mordecai chased after her, but she was gone. A few weeks later, Mordecai and Rigby entered a dodgeball tournament. While they were warming up, Mordecai spotted the masked girl across the gym. She was playing for the other team. Her name was CJ, short for Cloudy J. CJ had a special thing about her. When she got upset or emotional, her hair literally turned into a storm cloud. Sometimes it rained, sometimes there was lightning. Sometimes, when she was really upset, her whole body became a full-blown hurricane. That was the show's way of showing how she felt without having her say it. CJ and Mordecai agreed to put the awkward kiss behind them and just be friends. That friendship turned into dates. Those dates turned into a real relationship. By the middle of Season 5, Mordecai had a new girlfriend, and the show had a new main couple to follow. CJ was different from Margaret. Margaret had been poised, polite, ambitious, focused on her career. CJ was chill, goofy, loud, and loved the same kinds of things Mordecai loved: video games, pizza, dumb movies. She fit right into the park crew the way Margaret never quite had. She went on trips with Mordecai and Rigby. She hung out with Eileen. She was part of the group. When CJ was in an episode, the show felt more balanced than ever. The thing about CJ was that she and Mordecai had genuine chemistry that Mordecai and Margaret had always struggled to find. Mordecai had spent 4 seasons trying to be a version of himself that Margaret would like. Around CJ, he just got to be himself. The goofy, dorky, video game-loving, cartoon-watching, slightly slacker guy he actually was. CJ liked that guy. She liked him right from the start. But Mordecai was carrying a weight with him that CJ couldn't quite see. A piece of his heart was still somewhere else. Margaret was at college, far away, and he hadn't really let her go. He was dating CJ. He cared about CJ. And in some quiet corner of his mind, he was still thinking about the girl who had cried her way out of a restaurant and boarded a plane to Milton University. Season 5 also had one of the most important emotional episodes the show ever did for a side character. The episode was called Skips' Story. It aired in April 2014. The writers finally gave the audience the full backstory of Skips. Before he was the immortal skipping yeti working at the park, he had been a normal young man named Walks. He had been part of a group of students at a kind of secret magical academy. He had fallen deeply in love with a young woman named Mona. Mona had died tragically. A group of wise, ancient warriors called the Guardians of Eternal Youth had given Walks the gift of immortality afterward, and the magical ability to never stop moving his feet as a condition of that gift. That was why he skipped. Every step he took was, in a sense, a step of grief. He could never stand still again. He carried Mona's memory with him forever. Skips' story was a quiet, beautiful, emotional episode. It made Skips into a fully 3-dimensional character with real pain and real love in his past. The show was showing, across Season 5, that every character in the park had a story worth telling. Mordecai wasn't the only one with a heart. Everyone had one. Some of them had been carrying their broken pieces for hundreds of years. Eileen got more room too. She and Rigby kept having moments. In the episode Camping Can Be Cool, they had gotten close. In the Season 5 episode Video 101, Rigby tried to help her finish a film project. They kept circling each other. Rigby kept not quite admitting that he liked her. Eileen kept being patient. The slow burn of their relationship was one of the quiet pleasures of the whole show. The big Mordecai-CJ arc of Season 5 hit its peak in an episode called Dodge This. Mordecai and CJ went on a special dodgeball date. While preparing for the evening, Mordecai realized he still had an active profile on Couple Corral, the online dating site where he had originally met CJ. He tried to delete the account. The owner of the site, a sleazy little wizard named Matchmaker McIntyre, refused to let him leave. McIntyre made money from people being lonely. A happy couple leaving the site meant lost profit, so McIntyre attacked them. He tried to sabotage the relationship. He fired a literal rocket at them during their date. Mordecai saw the rocket coming and jumped in front of CJ to protect her. He took the hit. CJ thought he was dead. She went into full hurricane mode, more upset than she had ever been, ready to destroy everything around her. A charm bracelet Mordecai had been been wearing, which CJ had given him, suddenly pulsed with light. It had absorbed the rocket's blast. Mordecai was alive. The charm had saved him, and in the process, the bracelet had been welded into the permanent shape of a little heart. CJ put the bracelet on her own wrist and wore it for the rest of their relationship. It was a quiet symbol. He would have died for her. They were real now. They were serious. Across the back half of Season 5, Mordecai and CJ kept getting closer. Other things kept happening in the park. There were Halloween specials. There were Christmas specials. Pops got weird little adventures. Benson got stressed, as always. Muscleman and Starla stayed solid. Rigby kept being Rigby. Thomas the intern kept showing up in the background, still polite, still helpful, still hiding his secret. Season 5 ended on August 14th, 2014, with an episode called Real Date. Eileen had been going on a few dates with a guy she had met, and Rigby was completely fine with it. Completely fine. Extremely fine. So fine, in fact, that it became obvious to everyone, including himself, that he was actually furious. Rigby finally admitted what he had been hiding for years. He had feelings for Eileen. He crashed her date. He confessed in the clumsy, half-angry way that only Rigby could pull off. Eileen forgave him. They became an official couple. Rigby had finally, after 5 full seasons of running, stopped running. The Season 5 finale gave the audience 2 happy couples, Mordecai and CJ, Rigby and Eileen. Both best friends had finally figured out who they were supposed to be with. Both relationships felt real. The show was in a peaceful place. Real peace doesn't last on regular show, though. The show had spent 5 seasons teaching its audience that every quiet moment was followed by something weird, and every happy ending had a catch hidden inside it. Mordecai had CJ, but Mordecai had also never fully dealt with Margaret. He hadn't processed her leaving. He hadn't closed that door in his heart. He had just walked around the door and started a new relationship with someone else, while that old door stayed cracked open in the back of his mind. At the same time, Season 5 ended with a bigger universe waiting in the wings. There were hints scattered throughout the season. Pops was acting strange in certain episodes. There were quiet, subtle clues that the park itself, the big, happy workplace the show had built, might be something much more than it appeared. The writers were planting seeds. They were slow seeds. They wouldn't fully sprout until much later, but they were there. All of that would come. For now, as Season 5 closed on August 14th, 2014, the show was giving its audience a breath. 2 couples, a peaceful park, a best friend relationship between Mordecai and Rigby that was stronger than ever. Eileen had found Rigby. CJ had found Mordecai. Everybody was happy. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Season 6 premiered on October 9th, 2014, a little less than 2 months later. Its very first episode was called Maxin and Relaxin. The title sounded like peace. The title was a lie. Because Season 6 was going to be the season where every piece of that peaceful park setup got tested to its breaking point. Mordecai's feelings for Margaret, still living quietly in the back of his heart, were going to resurface in the worst possible moment. CJ was going to find out. Muscleman was going to propose to Starla, and their wedding was going to turn into a disaster that reshaped the entire show. And in the very last episode of the season, the park itself, the quiet, familiar green space that had been the home base of this cartoon since the very first frame, was going to do something nobody could have predicted. Something that would push regular show out of the backyard and into territory no cartoon had ever quite visited before. Section 7, Season 6, The Love Triangle, Dumped at the Altar, and the Cost of Not Letting Go. Season 6 started on October 9th, 2014, with Maxin and Relaxin. The title set up the joke. Mordecai and Rigby were supposed to have a few weeks of vacation time. They had planned to do absolutely nothing with it. Sit around, play video games, watch TV. Actually, officially, Maxin and Relaxin. The plan lasted about 5 minutes before the universe, as always, decided to drop a mess in their laps. By the end of the episode, their chill vacation had turned into a full adventure involving zombies, government agents, and a secret military base. The show was signaling right from the premiere that even the quietest moments in regular show were going to be interrupted. Peace was temporary. Trouble was the default setting. Mordecai was in a good place at the start of the season. He and CJ were solid. They were going on dates. They were saying, "I love you." They were a real couple, the kind of couple that has inside jokes and makes plans for the future. Rigby and Eileen were also officially together, still finding their footing but clearly working out. The whole park crew was in a stable spot. That stability lasted exactly until Christmas. The episode was called Merry Christmas, Mordecai. It aired on December 15th, 2014, and it quietly broke one of the most important promises the show had made to its audience. Eileen was throwing a big Christmas party at her apartment. All the usual people were coming. Mordecai and CJ, Rigby and Eileen, Muscleman and Starla, the whole gang. And then Eileen dropped a small piece of news that hit Mordecai like a punch to the gut. Margaret, who had been gone for a year and a half now, was coming home from college for the holidays. She was going to be at the party. Mordecai had not seen Margaret since she walked out of Stake Me Amadeus. He had moved on. He had a new girlfriend. beforehand. He was supposed to be past it. At the party, he tried to handle the situation like an adult. He greeted Margaret politely. He introduced her to CJ. He did everything right. And then, at a certain point in the evening, he and Margaret ended up alone together in a quiet corner of the apartment. Just for a second. Catching up, laughing about old memories, they kissed. On the mouth. A real kiss. CJ walked in on them. The look on CJ's face when she saw it was one of the most painful things the show had ever animated. Not angry, not even fully shocked, just broken. She turned around, she ran out of the apartment, she got into her car, she drove away. Mordecai and Margaret stood there staring at each other in shared horror at what they had just done. Merry Christmas, Mordecai was the moment the show finally made the audience face something it had been hiding from for a long time. Mordecai had never really gotten over Margaret. He had been dating CJ. He had loved CJ. And none of that had erased the thing he had carried around with him since the day Margaret got on that plane. The kiss was not a mistake he had planned. It was the truth surfacing in the worst possible way, at the worst possible moment, in front of the worst possible witness. The next several episodes handled the fallout. CJ went into full storm mode. Her hair clouded up. Rain fell wherever she went. In an episode called Sad Sacks, Mordecai tried to repair things. He asked Margaret to come to the park and talk to CJ directly, girl to girl. The conversation went badly. CJ wasn't ready to hear what Margaret had to say. She believed Margaret was trying to steal Mordecai, even though what had actually happened was more complicated and more honest than that. Margaret regretted the kiss. Margaret hated what she had done to CJ. Margaret, to her credit, was not a villain in this story. She was a girl who had loved Mordecai too, and had never gotten a clean ending either. That was the trap of the whole storyline. There was no clean bad guy. Mordecai had kissed Margaret. Margaret had kissed back. CJ was right to be hurt. Margaret was right to regret it. Mordecai was right to feel like the worst version of himself. Everybody had done the wrong thing at the wrong time, and there was no way to undo it. The show sat in that mess for a long time instead of rushing to fix it. An episode called I See Turtles, which aired later in the season, quietly moved the focus away from the love triangle and onto Eileen's friendship with both Margaret and CJ. Eileen was caught in the middle. She loved both of them. She had been friends with Margaret for years, back from their shared days as waitresses at the coffee shop. She had grown close to CJ through the park crew. Now the two of them were barely speaking. Eileen tried to fix the situation. She invited them both on a trip to see sea turtles, her favorite animal. The episode was sweet, a little sad, and one of the only times Eileen got to carry a storyline on her own. It was a quiet reminder that the love triangle wasn't just affecting Mordecai, it had ripples across the whole group. The triangle finally reached a point of resolution in the episode Just Friends. Margaret and Mordecai sat down together and had the conversation they should have had months, or really years, earlier. Margaret told Mordecai that she was glad he had found CJ. She told him that she had always cared about him, but that their moment had passed. She told him to go fight for his actual relationship and stop looking backwards. Mordecai and Margaret agreed, officially and out loud, to just be friends. For real this time. It was a mature ending. It was also a deeply sad one, because it was the version of the conversation they should have had on the airport car ride at the end of Stake Me Amadeus. Instead, they had danced around it for years and caused a huge amount of pain to a lot of people in the process. The show was not afraid to let its main character be wrong for that long. Mordecai had hurt CJ because he hadn't finished his business with Margaret. The show held him accountable for that. While Mordecai's romantic life was falling apart, the rest of the park was doing its own thing. Pops kept having gentle, strange adventures. Skips kept being the wise one. Benson kept losing his mind on a weekly basis. And Muscle Man, the green-skinned prankster, was about to have the biggest character moment of his entire life. Muscle Man had been dating Starla since season 3. The two of them were, underneath all the goofiness and the shirtless poses and the endless mom jokes, genuinely in love. They were a cartoon couple that actually worked. Starla was loud, tough, confident, and basically a female version of Muscle Man. They liked the same things. They laughed at the same jokes. They thought the same things were cool. In season 6, Muscle Man decided he was ready to take the next step. The proposal episode was called The Real Thomas. It sounds like a strange episode to carry a proposal, and that's because it actually did two huge things in the same 22 minutes. First, the long-running mystery of Thomas the intern got its answer. Thomas, that quiet, polite goat who had been helping around the park since season 4, revealed his real identity. His real name was Nikolai. He was a Russian spy. He had been undercover at the park the entire time, using it as a base of operations for intelligence work. The reveal was played for laughs, but it was also treated with real weight. The park crew had trusted Thomas for years. He had trusted them back, in his own way. When he finally left to return to his home country, it was a surprisingly sad goodbye. Thomas mattered to all of them. In the middle of all that, Muscle Man got down on one knee and asked Starla to marry him. She said yes. The whole park was invited to the wedding. Preparations began. The season 6 finale was titled Dumped at the Altar. It aired on June 25th, 2015. And it was another one of those big, big, ambitious, multi-episode feeling hours that regular show did so well. The wedding was set up. Everybody had their fancy clothes on. Pops was officiating. Guests were seated. The park looked beautiful. And then things started going wrong. A group of evil bounty hunters showed up. These weren't regular villains. These were serious, high-powered, almost science fiction level threats. They were looking for somebody specific. They were looking for Pops. The fight that followed destroyed most of the wedding setup. The park crew defended their friend. Muscle Man, in the middle of his own wedding, had to fight for his life alongside his best friends. The hunters pushed them to the edge. Things got desperate. And then, in the middle of all of it, Pops did something that changed the entire show. In order to save his friends from the bounty hunters, Pops used a hidden power nobody had ever seen before. The park itself, the whole thing, the grass and the house and the trees and the road and the little gazebo, pulled itself free from the ground. It launched into the sky. It rocketed up, through the atmosphere, out of Earth, and into outer space. The park became a spaceship. Or more accurately, the park was revealed to have been a spaceship the whole time, just sleeping in the dirt, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, Skips, Muscle Man, High Five Ghost, Pops, Eileen, and the rest of the crew ended up trapped inside the park as it flew through space. Starla was left behind on Earth, standing in her wedding dress at the altar, watching the entire park fly away with her groom still inside. She was, quite literally, dumped at the altar. The episode ended there. The park was in space. The wedding was ruined. Muscle Man and Starla had been separated at the moment they were supposed to become husband and wife. And Pops, the sweet old lollipop-headed gentleman the show had spent 6 seasons treating as the kindest, most innocent character in the whole cast, had revealed that he had a secret nobody in the crew had ever suspected. Pops was important. Pops was being hunted. Pops had powers nobody understood, and the bounty hunters were just the beginning. Season 6 had started with a Christmas kiss that broke up a couple. It ended with a wedding disaster that broke up a different couple and launched the entire park into space. The show had spent the whole season slowly putting pressure on every relationship it had built. Mordecai and CJ, Muscle Man and Starla, even the park itself, the stable physical place that had been the show's home base since the first episode, was now gone, floating through the stars. The audience watching on June 25th, 2015 had a lot of questions. What was Pops? Who wanted to kill him? Why was the park a spaceship? What was going to happen to Starla? What was going to happen to CJ? What was going to happen to everybody? Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The answers were coming. Season 7 was about to start just one day later, on June 26th, 2015. Cartoon Network had timed the seasons to flow straight into each other. The new season was going to pull Mordecai into a strange little town where his heartbreak would take a physical shape. It was going to finally give Rigby, the laziest character in the show, a chance to stop being the slacker and start being the hero. And sitting in the middle of the new season, 6 weeks after it began, a full-length regular show movie was going to hit theaters and reveal a secret about Rigby and Mordecai's friendship that would reframe the entire show they had been watching for 5 years. Section 8, Season 7 and the movie. Rigby grows up. The park launches. Season 7 premiered on June 26th, 2015, exactly one day after Dumped at the Altar. Cartoon Network wanted zero gap between the two seasons. The audience had just watched the park launch itself into space. They needed answers immediately. The premiere episode was called Dumptown, USA, and the answers it gave were not the ones anybody expected. The park flying into space turned out to be a temporary thing. By the start of Season 7, the park had come back down. It had landed somewhere. The crew was mostly fine. Mordecai, however, was not fine. The whole space launch, the wedding disaster, the CJ breakup that had happened during the chaos, all of it together had broken something in him. He woke up one morning and drove away from the park without telling anyone where he was going. He ended up in a place called Dumptown, USA. Dumptown was not a normal town. It was a strange little pocket of reality that existed just for men who had been recently dumped. Every resident of Dumptown was a guy in a wrinkled shirt with sad eyes and bad posture. They wandered around doing nothing. They refused to wash dishes. They ate frozen pizza straight out of the box. They played video games at 3 in the afternoon. Time moved differently in Dumptown. A few days in the real world passed as a few hours in Dumptown. The longer you stayed, the more stuck you became. The other men in Dumptown were men who had been stuck there for years, some of them for decades, slowly fading away from the real world because they had refused to deal with their heartbreak. Mordecai fit right in. He didn't want to feel anything. He wanted to sit on a couch and be numb. Dumptown gave him that option, and he took it. The episode became a horror story of its own kind. Mordecai was slowly turning into one of them, losing track of time, forgetting his life, eating bad food and not caring. Rigby figured out where he was. He drove to Dumptown. He broke his best friend out. He dragged him home. The episode ended with Mordecai back in the real world, a little more awake, a little less broken. Rigby had saved him. For years, the show had built its humor around Rigby being the lazy, selfish, childish one. Mordecai had always been the responsible friend taking care of Rigby. In Dumptown, USA, the roles flipped. Mordecai was the one who had fallen apart. Rigby was the one who had come to pick him up. That flip was not a one-time thing. It was going to be the shape of Season 7. The whole season quietly centered on Rigby in a way no previous season had. Mordecai's big romantic arc was basically over. Margaret was a friend now. CJ was gone. There was no new love interest waiting in the wings for Mordecai. So the writers turned their attention to the other main character, the one they had been holding back, Rigby. Rigby had a few big problems to deal with, and Season 7 was going to make him deal with all of them at once. The first problem was his relationship with his brother. Rigby had a younger brother named Don. Don had been introduced all the way back in Season 2 in an episode called Don. Here was the joke. Don was a raccoon just like Rigby, except Don was 7 feet tall. Enormous. A huge, hulking raccoon. Also, Don was an extremely successful accountant. Also, Don was sweet, funny, popular, and everybody he met immediately loved him. He was the opposite of Rigby in every possible way except for the family they shared. Don loved his older brother. Rigby hated his younger brother. Rigby was jealous of Don, and he had been jealous of Don since they were little kids. In Season 7, the show kept bringing Don back in, slowly, carefully, forcing Rigby to actually face the thing he had been running from his whole life. The second problem was Rigby's relationship with Eileen. They were together now. They had been since the end of Season 5, and Rigby was slowly realizing that he didn't deserve her. Eileen was smart. She was kind. She was going places in her life. Rigby was still the same raccoon he had always been, napping on the couch and dodging responsibility. He started to want to be better, for her sake and for his own. He didn't say it in big speeches. The show just showed him, little by little, making small efforts he had never made before. The third problem, and the biggest one, was school. Rigby had never graduated from high school. He had dropped out. It was a running joke in the early seasons that Mordecai, his best friend, found it hilarious that Rigby couldn't even finish high school. In Season 7, that joke stopped being a joke. Rigby decided he wanted his diploma. He wanted to finish what he had started. He signed up for night school. He started studying. He turned in homework. The same raccoon who had spent 6 seasons trying to avoid doing any work at all was now voluntarily sitting in a classroom doing algebra. Eileen helped him. She tutored him. She believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. In the middle of all this personal growth for Rigby, Cartoon Network dropped one of the biggest events in the show's history into the middle of Season 7, the Regular Show movie. Regular Show, the movie, premiered on August 14th, 2015, at a small theater in Los Angeles called the Downtown Independent. It was a limited run in theaters, shown for 1 week, and then it was released to digital download, DVD, and eventually to Cartoon Network itself. The movie was directed by J.G. Quintel himself, his first time directing a full-length feature. It featured the full voice cast from the show, plus 2 new big names. Jason Mantzoukas, a famous comedian, voiced the movie's villain. David Koechner, another famous comedian, voiced the high school principal in the flashback scenes. The budget for the movie was only $3 million, which in film terms is tiny. It made back way more than that. The movie was, by every measure, a hit. The story of the movie opened in the distant future. Rigby, now older, was leading a small rebel army consisting of Benson, Skips, High Five Ghost, Muscle Man, and Pops against an evil mastermind named Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross had weaponized something called a Timonado, a tornado that moved through time, and he was using it to erase the entire timeline of the universe. He was being guarded by a robot-like future version of Mordecai, who had turned evil and had personally shot future Rigby with a plasma shotgun. Future Rigby, dying, escaped in a time ship and crashed it in the present-day park. He warned present Mordecai and Rigby about the coming disaster. He told them a secret was going to come out, a secret that would end their friendship if Rigby didn't handle it carefully. Then he died. The park crew piled into the time ship. They traveled back in time to Mordecai and Rigby's high school days. Mr. Ross, it turned out, had been their science teacher and volleyball coach back then. A school experiment gone wrong had originally created the Timonado. Mr. Ross had been blamed and sent to prison. His future self had been nursing the grudge for decades. Now he wanted to destroy time itself as revenge. The mission was to stop their teenage selves from building the time machine that would create the Timonado in the first place. Mordecai and the crew traveled back, met their own younger selves, and tried to fix things. In the middle of all of it, the secret Rigby had been hiding finally came out. Mordecai had gotten into his dream college, a school called College University. He had been accepted. Rigby had not. When the acceptance letters came in, teenage Rigby had panicked. He couldn't stand the idea of Mordecai leaving him behind to go live a whole new life without him. So he had secretly rewritten Mordecai's acceptance letter into a rejection letter. He forged it. He handed the fake letter to Mordecai. Mordecai, heartbroken, had given up on college. He had never known the truth. That one lie was the reason Mordecai had ended up working as a groundskeeper at a park. That one lie was the reason reason the two of them had spent the last several years stuck in the same place. Rigby had trapped Mordecai's whole life inside a fake letter just to keep his best friend close. Mordecai found out. Mordecai was furious, not just a little angry, shattered. He told Rigby that everything he had blamed himself for, every dead-end job, every missed chance, every year he had spent feeling like a failure, was because of Rigby's selfishness. He told Rigby to leave. He said Rigby had held him back. He said they were done. He meant it. Rigby ran off with the time ship, broken, suicidal. He flew straight toward the sun. The time ship was damaged in the attempt. He ended up crashing into a strange realm and meeting Father Time himself, a giant bearded figure who was literally crumbling apart because of the Timonado damaging the timeline. Father Time told Rigby to go fix things, not for Mordecai, for himself, because running away was what had gotten Rigby into this mess in the first place. Rigby went back. He and Mordecai fought Mr. Ross together. They saved the universe. They destroyed the Timonado. Their friendship, cracked as it was, survived. In a final scene back in the present day, Mordecai and Rigby talked about what they had seen. They had witnessed their own future selves try to kill each other. They had seen what could happen if they let their bond fall apart. They made a small, quiet promise to each other. No more lies. No more sabotage. No matter what happened, they would stay friends. They agreed. That tiny conversation erased the dark future. The future where Rigby was shot and Mordecai became evil simply disappeared from existence. The movie was the first time Regular Show openly said something it had been saying quietly for years. Mordecai and Rigby's friendship was the single most important thing in the entire show. Every supernatural adventure, every time loop, every monster, every heartbreak, it all came back to those two. They were the reason the park worked. They were the reason the show worked. After the movie, Season 7 returned to television. Rigby kept going to night school. He kept studying. He kept growing. Mordecai watched his best friend change in front of him, and something shifted between them. Rigby was becoming the person Mordecai had always quietly wanted him to be. The Season 7 finale was a big one. It was called Rigby's Graduation Day Special. It aired on June 30th, 2016. A full half-hour episode, the kind Regular Show saved for its biggest moments. Rigby had made it. He had passed all his classes. He was going to graduate from high school, years later than he should have, but on his own terms. The whole park crew showed up to cheer him on. His parents came. Dawn came, 7 feet tall, beaming with pride. Eileen came. Mordecai stood in the audience and watched his best friend walk across the stage in a cap and gown. Rigby gave a graduation speech. It was simple. It was honest. He talked about doing hard things. He talked about the people who had lifted him up and shown him he was capable of more than he had believed. He thanked Eileen. He thanked his best friend Mordecai. He thanked his parents. He thanked Dawn. He told the graduating class that his success was just one link in a chain, that their success could be the next link. Billions of links, billions of people, all lifting each other up. It was the speech of a different Rigby. Not the Rigby from Season 1. Not the Rigby who had lied about the acceptance letter. A new one. A better one. And then the park launched again. In the middle of the ceremony, as everyone was celebrating, the ground under the park started rumbling. The trees bent. The sky darkened. The whole park lifted off the ground for the second time in the show's history. This time it didn't come back down. It rocketed up, up, and out, leaving Earth behind. The entire park crew was on board. Pops was with them. Benson was with them. Skips, Muscle Man, High Five Ghost, Mordecai, Rigby, and Eileen were all trapped inside as the park blasted through the atmosphere and out into the stars. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The episode ended there. The park was in space, sealed, flying away from everything its characters had ever known. The show's 8th and final season was already waiting on the other side of that launch. That season would be called Regular Show in Space, and it was going to explain, finally, after 7 full seasons of hints and mysteries, the real truth about the park. The real truth about Pops, and the real reason all of this had been happening from the very beginning. Section 9, Season 8, Regular Show in Space. The 8th season premiered on September 26, 2016. For the first and only time in the show's history, the title card was different. Regular Show was gone. In its place, glowing against a starfield, was a new name, Regular Show in Space. The show was fully committing to the shift. For this final season, the park was a spaceship. The characters were astronauts of a strange kind, and the quiet suburban energy of the earlier seasons was traded in for something bigger, wilder, and a lot more emotional. The premiere episode was called One Space Day at a Time. It picked up right where Rigby's Graduation Day Special had left off. The park had rocketed into orbit. The crew was shocked, confused, a little scared. They quickly realized that the park had landed somewhere specific. A massive space tree, floating in the middle of the galaxy, was acting as a sort of base. The tree was called the Space Tree, and it was home to a training program called the Space Tree Academy. Pops, it turned out, had been brought there by forces much bigger than himself. The rest of the crew had been pulled along because they were his friends, his chosen family. The Space Tree Academy was a kind of school for fighters. It trained space soldiers, space rangers, space warriors. The park crew had to enroll. They had to train. They had to get good at fighting, fast, because something was coming for them. Pops was in danger. Pops had been in danger for a long time. He just hadn't known it. The early Season 8 episodes worked almost like a training montage stretched across a whole arc. Mordecai and Rigby learned how to fight in zero gravity. Skips, already a veteran of ancient combat, leveled up his fighting style. Muscleman and High Five Ghost found their own specialties. Benson, the gumball machine who had spent 7 seasons yelling at park maintenance workers, suddenly had to lead an actual space combat team. The comedy of the early training episodes came from watching a cartoon workplace slowly turn into a cartoon military unit while the personalities stayed exactly the same. Benson was still furious. Rigby was still lazy. Pops was still sweet. The first real hint of the true enemy came in an episode called The Dream Warrior. Pops started having nightmares. Deep, violent, haunted nightmares. A shadowy figure was appearing to him in his sleep. An alien being had snuck into Pops' dreams and was trying to harm him from inside his own mind. The crew had to fight through Pops' subconscious to save him. At the end of the fight, the figure behind the attack finally revealed himself. He looked almost exactly like Pops. Same body shape, same lollipop-style head, same formal posture. But where Pops was bright and colorful, this figure was dark, shadowy, and wrong-looking. He introduced himself. His name was Malum Cranus. Pops started calling him Anti-Pops because he was the exact opposite of everything Pops stood for. Anti-Pops was voiced by an actor named Robert Englund. If that name sounds familiar, Englund was the actor who played Freddy Krueger in the horror movie series A Nightmare on Elm Street. His voice carried a natural menace that made Anti-Pops feel dangerous in a way the show had never done before. The character was not played for laughs. He was played as a real threat. From that episode on, Anti-Pops became the true villain of the entire final season. He had a small group of bounty hunters working for him. He had put a reward on Pops' head, 50,000 space credits, for anyone who could catch or kill him. He had been hunting Pops across the galaxy for years, maybe longer. Pops, the gentle butterfly-loving lollipop man who had spent 7 seasons being the kindest character in the show, was the target of an entire galactic murder plot. The audience had questions. The show was about to answer them. The answers came in an episode called Meet the Seer. The crew traveled to a place called Planet Nielsen in search of a mysterious figure known as the Seer, an all-knowing being who could explain what was happening. The Seer was a clear reference to a character called the Architect from a famous movie series called The Matrix. Big chair, lots of screens, long speeches full of riddles. The Seer sat Pops down and told him the truth about himself. Pops was not a normal person. Pops had never been a normal person. He had been born on a faraway planet called Lollyland. His real name was not Pops. His real name was Mega Cranus. He had been created as the perfect being of that world, a creature of pure goodness. In the universe's natural balance, every force has to have an opposite. When Mega Cranus was born, a second being was born at the same time, his dark twin, Malum Cranus, Anti-Pops. One brother was pure good, the other was pure destruction. Every 14 billion years, Mega Cranus and Malum Cranus had to fight each other. The fight decided the fate of the universe. Whoever won got to choose what the next universe looked like. There was just one problem. Their powers were perfectly balanced. Every single time they fought, the battle ended in a draw. The universe, unable to handle the tie, reset itself. It collapsed and was reborn, new and fresh, with the whole cycle starting over again. This had happened many, many times. The exact number was not known, but based on ancient tattoos found on an old mentor of Pops's, the cycle had repeated at least 20 times, possibly far more. Every universe that had ever existed, every star, every planet, every memory had been erased and remade over and over again, all because two brothers could not break a tie. Anti-Pops was tired of the cycle. He wanted it to end. He wanted to win, just once, and destroy the universe permanently. To do that, he was trying to kill Pops before their fated final battle, so he could break the cycle in his favor. That was the real reason for the bounty hunters, the nightmares, the attacks. Pops had to be erased before he came fully into his powers. An episode called The Ice Tape filled in another piece of the story. After the previous universe had reset, baby Pops had landed on Earth. A wealthy older man named Mr. Mellard had found him and taken him in. Mr. Mellard had raised Pops as his own son. That was why Pops had the last name Mellard. That was why Mr. Mellard owned the park. The park had been built around Pops as a safe, quiet place for him to grow. Mr. Mellard had always known his adopted son was something more than human, but he had tried his hardest to give Pops a normal, peaceful life for as long as he could. He had prepared things for Pops. He had left special items. He had set up training fighting scenarios disguised as normal events so that Pops would be ready when the time finally came. Every little weird thing about the park, in hindsight, had been planned. The dome experiments, the strange technology hidden in the basement, the way Skips had been quietly watching over Pops for decades. Everything had been groundwork. Mr. Mellard had spent an entire human lifetime preparing his son for a destiny neither of them could avoid. The middle stretch of Season 8 introduced new allies for the park crew. In an episode called The Last Laserdisc Player, the crew found themselves pulled into a battle involving giant beings called the Guardians of Obsolete Formats. These were huge figures with heads made to look like outdated machines. A Laserdisc player, a VHS player, an HD DVD player. The Guardians represented media that had been forgotten by the world. Their enemy was a new villain called Streaming, a sleek, modern, glowing figure who was trying to erase the old formats for good. The episode was a love letter to the kinds of technology the show had always referenced. VHS tapes, laserdiscs, arcade cabinets, all of it was now being personified and fought for, one last time. The crew defeated Streaming and befriended the Guardians. Later allies included characters named HD DVD and Blu-ray, who became part of the team going forward. The show also brought back old allies and old friends. Characters from earlier seasons started showing up in Season 8 as reinforcements. Death himself returned. Recap Robot, a silly character from earlier seasons, returned. The God of Basketball returned. The writers were building towards something huge, and they wanted every friend the park crew had ever made to be in the final battle. One of the most emotional episodes of Season 8 was called Cheer Up Pops. After meeting the seer and learning his true purpose, Pops became deeply depressed. He had spent his entire life being sweet and kind. He hated violence. He hated fighting. The idea that his destiny was to punch his own brother to death for the fate of the universe was crushing him. The park crew decided they had to cheer him up. They threw him a big party. They told jokes. They showed him old memories. In the middle of the party, their ally Blu-ray offered Pops a gift. She could record all of their memories onto a special set of Blu-ray discs. Every adventure they had ever had, every funny moment, every sad moment, every important piece of their shared past, all of it preserved on physical media. That way, no matter what happened, the memories of the park crew would never be lost. The whole episode had a heavy feeling behind it. The characters were, quietly, saying goodbye. They were acknowledging that their time together might be running out. The Blu-ray set got recorded. It got buried in a safe place. The scene of them burying it carried a weight that would only fully pay off much later. For now, the show just lingered on the idea. Memories matter. Preserving memories matters. You do not always get to keep the people you love, but you might be able to keep what they gave you. 2 more episodes built the road to the finale. One was called Space Escape. In this one, the crew broke into Anti-Pops' massive space station to steal important information. They took heavy losses. A pilot ally named Chance Sure-Shot appeared to die saving the team, though this would later be revealed to be a clone. The mission was bloody and scary. The show was not pretending anymore that Season 8 was just a silly space adventure. People could be hurt. People could be erased. Anti-Pops was serious. The other important episode was called Kill 'Em with Kindness. Pops, ever the optimist, made a bold attempt. He reached out to his brother Anti-Pops directly through a telepathic connection. He offered peace. He offered friendship. He said he did not want to fight. He said they did not have to follow the cycle. Anti-Pops pretended to consider it. He invited Pops to meet him at an arcade. Pops, trusting his brother, went. It was a trap. Anti-Pops attacked. The park crew arrived to save Pops in time, but in the escape, one of Pops' oldest mentors, an elderly teacher named Earl, was killed by Anti-Pops. The attempt at peace had failed. Pops had tried to love his brother out of being evil. It had not worked. A good and kind man had died for the effort. Pops could not hide from the truth anymore. He was going to have to fight. He was going to have to try to win. And if he lost, the universe would reset again, just like it had every other time, and everyone he loved would be erased along with it. The crew began their final preparations. They started the journey to Lollyland, Pops' home planet, for the fated battle. They had their ship. They had their allies. They had the memories on Blu-ray, safely preserved. They had each other. They had done everything they could. What they did not yet know was that the cycle was not actually unbreakable. The reason the brothers always tied was something deeper than power. It was something about how Pops had been fighting. It was something about what Anti-Pops actually needed. The way to end the cycle was not going to be a better punch, or a stronger move, or a smarter strategy. It was going to be something Pops would have to realize in the middle of the final battle itself. Something he would have to do that no version of him in any previous universe had ever done before. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The grand finale was coming. 3 parts, 1 hour. Every character the show had ever made. Every ally, every enemy, every memory, all of it. Building toward a single moment on a single planet, where a gentle, lollipop-headed gentleman would have to look his own brother in the eye and decide what kind of ending the universe deserved. The last 3 episodes of regular show were about to air on January 16th, 8th, 2017. And when the credits rolled on the third part, the show that had started with a blue jay and a raccoon playing punchies on a couch was going to end with one of the most emotional goodbyes in the history of animated television. Section 10. A regular epic final battle. The hug, the sun, and the statue in the park. January 16th, 2017. 6 in the evening, Eastern Time. Cartoon Network aired the 3-part series finale of Regular Show. The whole thing ran 1 full hour. Each part was a normal 11-minute episode, but they were stitched together as one big event. The full title was A Regular Epic Final Battle. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. The show was ending. The audience knew it. The crew had known it for a long time. Everything Regular Show had ever built was about to be spent in a single hour of television. The ratings reflected it. Part 1 drew 1.33 million viewers. Parts 2 and 3 each pulled 1.37 million. The finale was the most watched episode of Season 8 by a wide margin. Fans had been waiting. Fans had been dreading it too. The show they had grown up with was about to say goodbye. Part 1 opened with Pops having another nightmare. He was dreaming about the battle ahead. Mordecai and Rigby were at his side, trying to comfort him. Not long after, the ship arrived at Lollyland, Pops' home planet. The crew stepped off and met 3 of the planet's natives. A woman named Frivola Cranus, a being called Quadravi Cranus, and a funny character named Weird Mushroom Guy. These locals explained the full story of Pops and Anti-Pops. They showed the park crew ancient tapestries on the walls of old temples. The tapestries depicted every previous battle between the brothers, stretching back across billions of years. In every tapestry, different versions of the park crew stood beside Pops, helping him fight. The crew realized they had been here before. Every cycle, every reset, the same bond, the same friends, rebuilding themselves new each time. Mordecai and Rigby had been best friends in every universe. They just had not known it. Mordecai came up with a new plan. In every previous fight, Pops had faced Anti-Pops alone. The result had always been a tie. This time, they would lay traps for Anti-Pops ahead of the final duel. They would weaken him. They would give Pops an edge no previous version of Pops had ever had. The tapestries had always shown stalemates. Maybe this time, they could change the picture. Anti-Pops arrived on Lollyland with his own bounty hunters. The battle began. The traps worked at first. Pops landed a real hit, wounding his brother. Anti-Pops had agreed that whoever struck first would get to decide the universe's fate. Pops had struck first. The rules said he had won. Anti-Pops broke the deal immediately and kept fighting. At the same moment, the villain called Streaming arrived with his robot army to help Anti-Pops, making the fight bigger and more chaotic than anyone had expected. This is where Regular Show did something that no cartoon fan at the time had ever seen on a kids' channel. Every ally the show had ever built across 8 seasons came charging into the battle at once. HD, DVD, and Blu-ray arrived. The baby ducks from Season 2 were there, all grown up. Toothpick Sally, Recap Robot, Chance Sure Shot, Alive After All, The Guardians of Eternal Youth, Gary the Wizard, Carter and Briggs, the Intergalactic Cops, Death himself on his motorcycle, Party Horse, a very silly recurring character, the Guardian of Lollyland, who was supposed to stay neutral, joined in anyway. Every single ally Mordecai and Rigby had ever made in 8 years of television showed up, in the same place, at the same moment, fighting together to save the universe. Many fans of the show have pointed out that this is exactly the same move a very famous movie called Avengers Endgame would make 2 years later, when every hero from that franchise arrived through portals at the last second to help the main heroes. Regular Show did it first. A kids' cartoon on Cartoon Network beat the biggest movie franchise on Earth to the punch by a full year. The Allies combined their power into a single giant robot, a massive mech built from the pieces of every fighter on the battlefield. It looked like something out of an old Japanese cartoon about giant robots, and it stood beside Pops to help him survive his brother's attacks. The fight kept going. Pops and Anti-Pops clashed above the planet. The Allies fought Streaming and the robot army below. Party Horse landed breakdancing kicks on Streaming. The Megazord-style robot held the line. Anti-Pops had a running joke across Season 8. He gave 1-star ratings to everything. Every restaurant, every product, every service, all 1 star. In a beautiful piece of symmetry, Streaming was eventually destroyed by a giant literal star. 1 star, death by irony. The show never broke its sense of humor, even in the final fight. Part 2 ended with the battle at its peak. Reality itself started to break. The universe could feel the stalemate coming. The fabric of existence began tearing at the seams. In one scene, Pops flew straight through the actual title card of his own show. In another, Rigby briefly turned into a post-it note sketch, the kind of rough drawing animators use in the earliest stages of a cartoon. In another, Mordecai appeared as a single still frame in a storyboard panel. The show itself was falling apart, fourth walls shattering, reality becoming cartoonish in ways it had never been before. 2004. Part 3 was titled The Power. That was also the name of the very first episode of the entire series, all the way back on September 6, 2010. The show was bookending itself, starting where it had started. Part 3 opened with what looked like a complete reset. Mordecai and Rigby were back in the living room, playing video games, just like they had in the pilot. Everything looked normal. Everything felt off. Rigby started having weird flashes, memories he could not place, flashes of episodes he had lived, The Power, Hello China, the Dome Experiment, Cool Bro Bots, Space Escape. His mind was catching up to the fact that his life was not supposed to look like this. The cycle had reset again. Pops and anti-pops had fought to another stalemate. The universe had collapsed and been reborn. Everyone should have forgotten everything. Rigby did not forget, because of the Blu-ray discs. Back in Cheer Up Pops, the crew had recorded every memory onto a special physical format, and Blu-ray had helped them do it. Those discs had survived the reset. Rigby's mind, touching the recorded memories, slowly woke up to what was really happening. Mordecai, next to him, started remembering too. The boys realized they had to go back. They had to return to the final battle. They had to stop the cycle before Pops and Anti-Pops finished the fight and everything started over again. Using the power of the magical keyboard from the very first episode, the same keyboard from The Power that had started the whole show, they traveled forward in time, back to the battle between the brothers. Anti-Pops attacked them on arrival, destroying the power in the process. Pops was still fighting. He was exhausted. He was losing hope. In a quiet moment during the chaos, Pops had a kind of flashback. He remembered the first two parts of the finale. He remembered the attempt at peace in Kill 'Em with Kindness, and then he saw something he had been missing the whole time. In every previous cycle he had fought, punched, countered, struggled. He had tried to win, and every time the fight had ended in a draw, because fighting was never going to break the cycle. The balance between pure good and pure destruction could only be broken when the pure good stopped trying to destroy the destruction and started doing something it had never tried before. Pops grabbed Anti-Pops. He stopped fighting. He wrapped his arms around his brother in a hug. He spoke to Mordecai and Rigby directly through his mind, a telepathic goodbye, telling them what he was about to do. The hug shocked Anti-Pops. For one small moment, the brother who had been created as pure evil, who had been hunting Pops across eternity, softened. Anti-Pops looked at Pops. In his face, he saw something he had never been given before. He saw someone who actually loved him, not feared him, not hated him, loved him. That changed something. Anti-Pops hugged Pops back. Pops flew upward, carrying his brother with him. Together, holding each other, Pops and Anti-Pops flew straight into the sun of Lollyland. The two beings of pure opposite power, finally together, disappeared into the brightness. The universe stopped trying to reset. The cycle, billions of years old, broke for the first time. The effects of Anti-Pops' erasing were reversed. Every character who had been erased by Anti-Pops came back. The battle was won. Pops was gone. The song that played over the final montage was Heroes by David Bowie. It was not a random choice. David Bowie had died on January 10th, 2016, almost exactly 1 year before the finale aired. The song doubled as a tribute. Bowie had been a cultural figure who represented creativity, weirdness, and fearless originality. Playing his voice over the last moments of regular show was a gift to him and to the audience at the same time. The montage showed what came next. The park crew, minus Pops, spent 3 years in space cleaning up after the battle. Eventually, they flew the park back to Earth. The whole town came out to welcome them home. A huge crowd cheered. Mordecai hugged his parents. Rigby's father, who had always been critical of him, embraced his son with full pride. Starla ran to Muscle Man and introduced him to their newborn daughter, who had been born while he was in space. The crew was reunited with everyone they had ever loved. Mr. Mellard had to be told the news. His adopted son, the lollipop-headed gentleman he had raised as his own, was gone forever. He had died a hero. A memorial statue was built in the middle of the park. It was carved in the shape of Pops. Underneath it was a plaque. The plaque read, "He chased butterflies. He loved to laugh. He saved the universe. He was our friend. Pops Mellard." Then the montage jumped forward. 25 years. The park crew, now older, gathered for a reunion. Some of them had hair streaked with gray. Some of them had families of their own now. A second statue had been built next to Pops' statue. Mr. Mellard had passed away in the years since, and the park had honored him too. Every main character got their quiet ending. Mordecai had followed the dream he had given up on as a teenager. He had become an artist. He had met a woman at one of his art showcases, a bat named Steph, also an artist. They had married. They had children. He was happy. Not the Mordecai of season 1, still stuck on a couch. A grown man who had made something of his life. Rigby had married Eileen. They had 2 daughters. He was shown playing video games at home with his kids, a happily settled father. The raccoon who had forged a college rejection letter because he was afraid to be alone had become a husband, a dad, and a man who finished what he started. Muscle Man had more children with Starla. High Five Ghost had become a professional DJ. Benson was still running the park, now with a new, younger crew of groundskeepers, and Skips was still there there with him because Skips was immortal and was going to outlive everyone. Skips would eventually be the last one left who remembered the original crew, and the show quietly acknowledged that fact without saying it out loud. At the reunion, Rigby and Mordecai, middle-aged now, stood together and looked at the park. Rigby said he could not believe it had been 25 years. Mordecai said he wished Pops could have been there to see it. Rigby said that if it had not been for Pops, none of them would have this. Mordecai agreed. Then Rigby wondered out loud if their old video games were still in the shed. Mordecai said they should go check. For old cart's sake, Rigby said. The two of them made an excited old noise together, the same noise they had made 1,000 times across 8 seasons, and walked off toward the shed, side by side. The final shot of the entire series was a tiny one. Pops, somewhere else now, was sitting and watching a television. On the television, the title of the show he had starred in for 7 years played across the screen. Regular show. Pops smiled his big, sweet, satisfied smile. He spoke his catchphrase for the very last time. Jolly good show. The credits rolled. The series was over. 244 episodes, 8 seasons, 1 theatrical movie, 1 Emmy, and countless little moments that had carried an entire generation from childhood into adulthood, alongside a blue jay and a raccoon. The show had started with 2 friends on a couch trying to avoid their jobs. It had ended with one of those friends becoming an artist with a family, the other becoming a husband and a father, and their oldest friend sacrificing himself to save the universe so they could have the lives they were meant to have. The story of Regular Show had ended, but the quiet dream of it still had somewhere to go. Years after the finale aired, in June of 2024, Warner Bros. Discovery announced that a brand new Regular Show series had been greenlit. J.G. Quintel was returning as showrunner. Mark Hamill had confirmed he was coming back as Skips. William Salyers had returned to the studio to record new lines as Rigby. Janie Haddad had returned as Margaret. The show, once ended, was opening its eyes again. A new series titled Regular Show: The Lost Tapes was set to premiere on May 11th, 2026. The park, somehow, was not quite finished. The boys were coming back. Until then, a blue jay and a raccoon sat somewhere in memory, on a couch that never got dusted, playing video games that never ran out of batteries, in a park that was always waiting for the next cart to roll down the path. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.